Hi, everybody. Welcome to my podcast, Journeys with Jack. Hopefully, I'll give you some tips that will enhance your trip. So, today I'm going to speak about Istanbul, but before I get to that great city, let me tell you how I got there. So, my family and I were on a cruise run by a line called Celestial in Greece, going to the various Greek islands. And I noticed that the cruise would dock in Lavrio, which is on the southeast coast below Athens, and we had about 8 hours before we would need to fly from Athens to Istanbul. So I prevailed upon the officers of the cruise ship to contact the gentleman making the travel arrangements, and we were able to prevail upon the cruise company and the travel arrangements company to let us take a few hours at Sunyon Beach, which was near Lavrio. I had picked that on the map previously, and so for $250, family of five, had a nice beach day. We went there in the shadow of the Temple of Poseidon, made famous by a visit from George Gordon, Lord Byron, the English poet. I think this was during his sojourn in Greece when he wrote the famous poem Ode to a Grecian Urn around the 1800s. And this day was really lovely. We were at what I would call a locals beach, lots of Greek spoken, didn't see too many foreign tourists. Single hotel and one tavern. We spoke to the tavern owner and she let us set up a couple of tables, eat an early lunch there, have some beverages, and swim in the sea. Well worthwhile. Change clothes in the van and in the local bathroom and off to the Athens airport and then on to Turkey. We flew Turkish Airlines. It was great. By the way, when was the last time you heard somebody say that about the airline? Even the uniforms were cool. So coming into Istanbul, it's a very large airport, and Istanbul is a very large city. I think about 18 million people. So we availed ourselves of a service offered by our hotel, the Para Palace Hotel, where they would send a van for you for a little bit extra, and I was glad that they did. We met a gentleman with a placard with our name on it, and then we found out that we needed to have visas to get into Turkey. Well, that was a surprise. The gentleman was very helpful and shepherded us through the process with a minimum of hassle. I would like to point out that sometimes the visa deal is on with Turkey, sometimes it's not, so you need to check in advance. Don't be a schmuck like I was. And this is another little tip. Buy the visa with euros rather than dollars. For some reason, it's cheaper in euros. Okay, so we loaded into the van and away we went, got into Istanbul proper and into the Para section and onto the Para Palace Hotel. This hotel was built about 1892, very famous, lots of cool people stayed there. We had booked Agatha Christie's room. She stayed in room 411 and wrote Murder on the Orient Express there. As we were guests in her room, they gave us this cool little memento. Hopefully y'all can see this. I'll hold it up. It says Agatha Christie, room 411, and on this side, Para Palace Hotel. Other famous luminaries there were Alfred Hitchcock, Ernest Hemingway, Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, Greta Garbo, the World War I spy, the Mata Hari, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Joseph Broz Tito, the dictator of Yugoslavia, and perhaps most locally famous was the first president of Turkey, Kemal Ataturk. So he was also a hero in the Battle of Gallipoli, took Turkey from being a sultanate to a republic. They have an entire suite of rooms devoted to him. You can also tour some of the other rooms. We were able to look at the Alfred Hitchcock room, which gave a brilliant view out over the Bosporus and the Golden Horn area. Unfortunately, couldn't tour Hemingway or Ian Fleming's, etc., as those were occupied. But it just depends on the occupancy of what you can do. So that being done, my son Sam and I set out to go to see the Galata Tower in nearby Galata area, which abuts the Para area. So the girls stayed at the hotel and off we went. It was well signposted. It took us about 10 to 12 minutes to get to this tower, which was built in the 1300s by Genoese merchants for purposes of defense, etc., to consolidate their trading gains, etc. Now, the Galata Tower is generally quite crowded. It gives you a really, really good view from the top out over the city and the beautiful horns of the Bosporus. Golden Horn area, etc. So we were there in the twilight, and that's when it's less crowded. Now, it's always a bit crowded. It's a great tourist attraction, but if you go later in the day, it's a little easier. And we waited in line for a while, then got up to the top, and were rewarded with a tremendous view. The museum in the tower in and of itself is fascinating. Dates back to the trading times where Constantinople, as the city was known in that day, was really dominated by foreign trading powers, the Genoese, for example. So let's talk about the name of the city. So it was originally Constantinople, founded by Emperor Constantine of the Roman Empire times during the 300s, and he moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Constantinople. He also was the man that made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. So it bore his name until the 1920s when, under Kemal Ataturk, the first president, they changed the name from Constantinople to Istambul, and hence the name remains. So after seeing the Galata Tower, Sam and I came back to the hotel, and as is my custom, I spoke at length with the night manager and the concierge. They gave me a lot of pointers for how to get around on the tram system, and a great plus, they gave me a tram card, which they had, which was already loaded up to ride on the tram system. They explained that if I needed to put some more money on it, I could insert it into a machine near one of the stops and pay some lira into the machine, etc., etc. So this was a great advantage. So come the next morning, we were going to go to the old city and go see the Hagia Sophia. So the five of us got in a cab, as the girls didn't really want to try doing the tram, and away we went. Now the cab driver was a bit surly, as some are, and he was not overly helpful, and he dropped us down beside the Bosporus, and we had to walk up through a bunch of souvenir stalls in Old Town to get uphill to the Hagia Sophia. But this proved to be to our advantage, because I got some cool souvenirs. All over the place they sell these little change purses, which, if you can see this, it's got a picture of the Hagia Sophia and says Istambul on it. Make for some great souvenirs to bring back to folks. I brought plenty of them back to hand out. But here was sort of the piece de la resistance of that portion of the trip. We got some fezzes, and there's nothing really more traditionally Turkish than the fez. So there you go. So my son and I each got one, and he liked it so much he wore his around a bit more than me. So getting on to the Hagia Sophia, this magnificent church was built during the reign of Emperor Justinian, who is by far the most preeminent of the Byzantine emperors. Subsequent to the reign of Constantine, things sort of eventually declined in the Roman Empire until it fell AD 472. So that would be the Western Roman Empire, but the Eastern Roman Empire continued to exist as the Byzantine Empire, up until 1453 when it was invaded by the Ottomans. So Justinian in the 600s AD was the most effective, it seems, in my estimation, of all the Byzantine emperors. Certainly, I would think the most famous. So Justinian, he had Hagia Sophia rebuilt on the site of a previous wooden church that had burned down after a riot. It's amazing that this church was built by two mathematicians who geometrically worked out how to do the dome. There weren't architects involved. Now, this was the largest church in the world before later was a museum. Then under the rule of Turkish President Erdogan, it became a mosque again. Nonetheless, massive, massive undertaking, and the dome itself is incredibly, incredibly beautiful and awe-inspiring, I would have to say. So when you go, you're going to wait in line for a while. It's probably the number one tourist attraction there in Istanbul, I should think. And women need to wear scarves over their head, and then you also need to take off your shoes as you come inside, because remember, it's been converted to a mosque. It was really well worth the time. I've got lots of pictures on Facebook, Instagram that correspond to this podcast. I don't think I'm going to do it justice trying to describe it. So subsequent to the Hagia Sophia, we went across the little street and pedestrian area into the gardens of Topkapi Palace, rested in the shade, drank some water, and the girls announced that they were going to go down to the Grand Bazaar and go shopping for designer clothes and bags, probably of dubious authenticity. Apparently there's three categories. There's fake fakes, authentic fakes, and then things that might be real. I don't know. You'll have to go elsewhere to figure out that one for me, I suppose. But Sam and I decided that we would go to the Archaeology Museum, which was a bargain at 100 Turkish lira, $3. In this, we saw lots of ancient artifacts from Ephesus, Egypt, etc. A lot of gold, metallurgy, some religious artifacts from Ephesus. But the piece de la resistance was the sarcophagus of the world's greatest general, Alexander the Great. I was astonished. There are lots of statues for him as well. And it has to be remembered, Alexander the Great was from nearby Macedonia. So after the Archaeology Museum, we went over and looked around the Topkapi Palace, and then later went over to the Blue Mosque, which was mildly interesting, but it just wasn't on the same scale as the Hagia Sophia. Then we went to the Hippodrome. The Hippodrome was where they used to have chariot races back in the day, and where the riot that burned the original church on the site of the Hagia Sophia broke out in the 600s during the reign of Emperor Justinian. And this actually broke out between rival sports factions. So the Blues and the Greens supported different chariot teams, and there also were political overturns. So this riot was put down by the sword by Justinian's general Belisarius. So this led to the formation of the current Hagia Sophia. So subsequent to the Hippodrome, it being a hot day, we decided we would go check out the Basilica Cistern, also known as the Great Cistern, particularly because it was going to be indoors, underground, and amongst some cooling water. We had to wait for a while, but again, this was a great bargain, only $3. The Basilica Cistern, you might remember, was featured in the James Bond movie From Russia with Love. Now, earlier I mentioned Ian Fleming staying at the Para Palace Hotel. So Ian Fleming wrote From Russia with Love to be set in Istambul, so some of that work was done while he was visiting Istanbul. So in the movie From Russia with Love, which was the second of the James Bond series and stars Sean Connery, you might recall that Sean Connery and his contact go into a bazaar, down through the floor and into a boat, and come along somewhere where they put up a periscope and spy on the Russian embassy. Well, they took the boat ride and the Basilica Cistern, which had been lost to memory till about 1545 when it was rediscovered by a Frenchman living in Istanbul who wrote about it. And then most people didn't really pay a whole lot of attention until it was restored maybe, as a tourist attraction within the past half century where you could actually access it and look around. It's fascinating. Now, it had been known for a while to the local people in Istanbul. People could fish through the basement floor, kind of like you would do ice fishing, where you cut out a hole in the ice in Minnesota and drop a line in, and people would catch fish through the floor of their basement. Fascinating. Anyway, the Basilica Cistern was built to bring fresh water into Istanbul in the event of a siege. This was also done during the reign of Justinian, who, as I mentioned, was really the most effective and was the pinnacle of the Byzantine Empire, I think. So they brought this water through an underground aqueduct from the Belgrade forest 19 kilometers away. So that's about 10 miles that they were able to bring this water underground. This engineering feat in the 600s AD was remarkable. So they used various and sundry different columns from older structures. So when you go in and view the Basilica Cistern, you'll see examples of Corinthian, Ionic, Doric columns, and there's 2 old Medusa heads that columns sit upon. It's really quite fascinating. Please refer to the photographs I've got on Instagram and Facebook. I think it'll put it in better perspective for you. Well, subsequent to checking out the Great Cistern, Sam and I came out and we decided to give it a go on the tram, and it worked out really easily. They have pillars with directions showing you which tram lines to go to where, and we realized from our walk to the Galata Tower the night before that there was a funicular railway near our hotel which connected to the tram system. So we rode back to the funicular, and I love funicular railways. Those are cool. The one I know of in the United States is at Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, outside of Chattanooga. I think it's called the Incline Railway. But there's another one over in Budapest, Turkey that I've read, and it gives a great view of that city, but I guess that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, the funicular railway in Istanbul runs through a tunnel, and when you stand on the car, you just feel a little bit awkward because the car is on this about 45 to 60 degree angle, and you're standing upright, but you've got to lean back, otherwise you might tilt over. It's pretty cool. Try it out. So getting back to the hotel, the girls weren't back from their shopping spree, so Sam and I availed ourselves of the indoor swimming pool, the sauna, the steam room, and of course the Turkish baths. It was great. Well, we met up with the girls, had dinner, and we saw their great haul from the Grand Bazaar and heard all the stories. So the next morning, Sunday morning, we got up, had another magnificent breakfast, and decided we would all go up to Istambul Street, the pedestrian shopping area that was very close to the Para Palace Hotel, really only a matter of a few blocks walk. Istambul translates as independence, and so this is Independence Avenue. Well, as we were there, we shopped and shopped, and I thought I made a rather good deal. I noticed in one place that a fellow was checking out this sports car club shirt that I had, so I asked him if he wanted to trade. So I traded for this very shirt that I'm wearing. I'm going to lean back so you can see it. So I got this Lacoste shirt. I made a trade, and I got a Liverpool soccer team t-shirt for my son Sam and this Lacoste shirt for me. Pretty good deal, I thought. Then it being Sunday, we went to church. There's the Union Church is on Independence Avenue, Istambul Street, and I met a nice missionary from Kansas who'd been over there preaching for a while. Then Sam and I got back on the funicular railway, rode down to the tram, and wanted to go see the Constantine column, which dated back to AD 300 in the Cimberlitis area. So Cimberlitis is Turkish for hooped stone, and that refers to the way that the column was preserved. They put iron hoops around it so that it would not break into pieces in the 1500s during a restoration effort under the Ottoman Empire. So having seen that great sight, we decided we'd go over to the Grand Bazaar. So Sam and I went over there, and lo and behold, it was closed. So the Grand Bazaar is open 8:30 till 7 p.m. every day except for Sunday. So bear that in mind and use that when you're traveling to Istanbul. So we wandered around a bit, but back to the hotel to use the pool, the sauna, of course, the Turkish baths again. Then had a great alfresco dinner outside at the Para Palace Hotel again with the girls and saw what they'd purchased shopping. Funny thing, I told my wife I wanted to get a leather belt in Turkey, and so she'd bought two on Istambul Street while I bought one, and two of them were identical. I guess I've got a spare now. Anyway, very thoughtful of her. So the next day, we headed back to the United States via Athens and Turkish Airlines. Great trip. I'm going to highly recommend going to Istanbul, and I think we've only scratched the surface. There's probably plenty more to do, but I think we did pretty well, acquitted ourselves well in the short time that we were there. Let me recommend the Para Palace. It's very reasonable. You get to stay in an elegant Victorian-era hotel for only about $300 a night via Expedia. Quite a bargain, I thought, for what we received. The food is great. The staff, tremendous. In fact, we felt that everywhere we went in Istanbul, people were very friendly, very helpful, with the exception of the taxi driver. But hey, cab drivers worldwide, people complain about them. After all, Lenny Kravitz recorded a song in which he complained about the cab driver, didn't he? So the other things I'd like to point out is that it was well worth it to use the pickup service that the hotel offered, as they helped shepherd us through a somewhat confusing airport and also helped us with the visa situation. So I hope you'll consider Istanbul. I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.